Welcome to the Manufacturing Money Room with host Tolani Lawson. Tolani is an experienced CFO who works with manufacturing businesses to bring clarity to their numbers, especially when cash feels tight and decisions feel heavy. These are the conversations that usually stay behind closed doors. Until now, it's time to step into the Manufacturing Money Room.
Let's start with a question. How many problems inside your business do you discover after they've become expensive? A shipment goes out late, a customer becomes frustrated, inventory grows larger than expected, margins come in below target, or cash feels tighter than it should. The frustrating part is usually not the problem itself. It's the realization that the warning signs were there all along. You just did not see them early enough. One of the most common things I hear from manufacturing leaders is that if I had known about that 2 months ago, we could have fixed it. That's true. And that's what today's episode is about. Because after working with several manufacturing businesses for years, I've noticed something important. The strongest companies are not necessarily better at avoiding problems. They are better at seeing them sooner, and they spot these issues while they are still manageable, while they still have options, and while the solution is still inexpensive. The companies that struggle are often operating in what I call the rear view mirror. They're learning about issues after they've already impacted customers or cash flow or profitability. And most importantly, they've already impacted operations because operations is the root of everything. Today, we're going to talk about how manufacturers can close the visibility gap because visibility is one of the most underrated competitive advantages in businesses. So, why does visibility matter more than anything else in a business? One big misconception in leadership is that better decisions come from smarter people. In reality, better decisions come from better visibility. So think about driving a vehicle. If the windshield is clear, decisions are easy. You can anticipate, you can adjust, you can avoid problems. But if you're driving while looking mostly in the rearview mirror, everything becomes more reactive. That's how many businesses operate because you're looking at monthly financial statements after they arrive at the end of the month, or you're doing your inventory review after you already have excess inventory accumulated. Sometimes production issues are seen only after the customer complains. So the challenge is not about the intelligence of the person running the business, it's about the timing. So, what we want to do is to be able to see these problems sooner and have more choices. I'm going to talk about the 5 areas of visibility that every manufacturer needs. And we've kind of touched on this on previous episodes, but now we want to deep dive into these areas. If I walk into a manufacturing business, there are 5 areas that I immediately want visibility. The first one is open orders. Can leadership see what has been promised? Can you see what is due and can you see what is at risk? So, what type of system are you running? If you're running your production in spreadsheets, which absolutely should not be, you should have an ERP system. Are you entering those customer quotes into your system and then converting them into orders? So, at any point in time, you can tell, or anyone in the business can tell, how much is in there in open orders, the quantity, the dollar amount, and which customers these items have been promised to. So the first item, as I said, open orders. The second item is your production status. Can leadership identify bottlenecks before they impact customers? Do you have a production schedule? Now that you have your customer orders in the system, how are you scheduling your production? Do you have some form of demand planning system in place to make sure that production is scheduled on time? Are you considering the lead time in your production process to make sure that customers get their goods delivered on time? The third item where you absolutely need visibility is inventory. Can the company distinguish between productive inventory and excess inventory? Now, this goes back to the first 2 items, your open orders and your production status. Once you have your open orders in place, you know how much orders are out there that are already won. And then you have your production schedule to know how long it's going to take to go into production. This is where your inventory planning comes into place, where you have your material requirements based on what you know that you need and what the lead time for production and lead time for purchasing is. You want to make sure that you are not bringing in excess inventory. We talked about inventory in an earlier episode. Excess inventory in your warehouse is literally cash sitting unproductive. So you want to make sure that you do have productive inventory and you are distinguishing between those two types of inventory. You also want to ensure that you are tracking your obsolete and slow moving inventory as you run through this level of inventory visibility. Now, the fourth item is cash movements. Can leadership see cash pressure before it becomes urgent? This is where you do need a partnership with a strong financial expert who understands the manufacturing working capital cycle. You need to always have a 13-week cash forecast at any point in time to be able to see what types of near term cash pressure your business might be under. What I personally do is I do extend that cash forecast through the end of the year at any point in time because this allows you as a business to plan for things like spikes in demand, equipment purchase, slow paying customers, or be able to identify problems before they become problems within your business. And then the fifth one is customer commitments. Can leadership quickly identify which commitments are likely to be missed? Most companies have some version of this information, but the difference is how quickly and consistently you can see it. Let's talk about the cost of delayed visibility. The cost of poor visibility is really obvious. It shows up indirectly in your business. So, we've talked about seeing more overtime or expedited freight and more customer escalations or cash pressure. In general, this all results in leadership stress, and eventually, leaders find themselves reacting instead of managing. One of the most expensive phrases in manufacturing is "we did not know," because by the time you know, the cost has already been incurred. So that is basically the customer call that nobody wants to see or hear. I worked with a manufacturer that prided itself in customer service, and one morning a customer called asking about a shipment. Leadership assumed that everything was on schedule, but it wasn't. A production issue had surfaced weeks earlier, and several people knew pieces of the story, but nobody had visibility to the full picture. The customer learned about the problem before leadership did, and that's a painful position for any business to be. The issue for that specific company wasn't execution, it was visibility. And once leadership created a simple review process around open orders and production risk, those surprises largely disappeared. And it's not because problems stopped happening, it's because problems became visible earlier and you can understand and catch these issues before they become problems. So, this is not about eliminating problems in a business. It's about creating metrics to make sure that we can identify those problems early enough. Now, we've talked about creating visibility without creating bureaucracy. Let's dig into this a little more. One reason that some leaders resist visibility systems is because they imagine complexity. And we do not want to build complexity into our business. We don't want more reports or more meetings or more administration. What we want is strong visibility that is usually simple. A few key metrics reviewed consistently, a weekly operating reading, clear ownership. The goal is not more information, the goal is better awareness. So, the best manufacturing dashboards answer one question: what needs my attention before it becomes expensive? That's it. What we need is a simple visibility framework. If you're listening and wondering where to start, I'll say begin here. Every week, ask what is behind schedule, what inventory increased, what customer commitments are at risk, and what cash pressure is emerging, what operational bottlenecks appeared. That's it. Those five questions alone can dramatically improve visibility because visibility doesn't come from a software, it just comes from disciplined review of your business, regardless of what type of software you're using. One of the most valuable things a manufacturing leader can create is not a better forecast, because forecasts are wrong. It tells you it's going to rain today and then it's a nice sunny day. It's not about better reports, and it's not even just about better processes. It's early awareness, because the earlier you see a problem, the more options you have, the less expensive that solution becomes. One big mistake that a manufacturing leader can make is believing that visibility is the destination. Visibility is a tool. The destination is really control, because you need control over delivery performance, control over inventory, cash flow, profitability, and growth. Because whether we're talking about profit leaks, cash pressure, systems, or operational performance, the same pattern shows up every time. You cannot control what you cannot see. And the businesses that consistently outperform their competitors, they're not necessarily working harder or smarter. They're simply seeing reality sooner. That they identify problems where there's still time to respond, and they spot trends before they become issues. So the goal is recognizing drift before it becomes damage. And that's the real value of visibility. It's not just information, it's awareness. And awareness creates options. Before we close, I'd encourage you to do one thing. Think about the biggest surprises your business experienced over the last 6 months. Maybe it was a margin issue, a customer issue, a cash flow issue, whatever it might be, inventory or production. Now ask yourself, what signal existed before this happened that we either didn't see or we did not pay attention to? Because every significant business problem leaves clues before it arrives. Strong manufacturers build systems that help them see those clues earlier. And that's what creates resilience. That's what creates predictability. And ultimately, that's what creates stronger businesses. In our next episode, we're going to talk about what happens after visibility, because information by itself doesn't improve performance. As a company that is scaling successfully, you need to know how to turn information into action. You want to know how to make faster decisions and align your leadership team effectively. And focus that attention on what matters the most, because seeing the problem is important, but also acting on it is where results are created. I'll see you in the next episode.
Thanks for spending time in the Manufacturing Money Room. If this episode gave you something to think about, let us know. Drop Tolani a voice note or leave a comment or a review. And hey, if you like what you heard, share it with your friends. If you didn't like what you heard, share it with your enemies. You'll find the links in the show notes to connect with Tolani, and if you want to watch the episode on YouTube, that's there as well. Join us next time in the Manufacturing Money Room, where it's all about better numbers, better decisions, better manufacturing.